Good evening, everybody. Our top stories, a lot of major events and developments in what has been another day of strong challenges and demands for President Trump. And it is clear the president is fully committed to carrying out his agenda, advancing today on every issue from the appointment of his next attorney general, reacting to the Mueller witch hunt, and countering persistent attacks by the radical dim leaders who will take control of Congress in the new year. President Trump appears poised to name William Barr as the next attorney general. Barr is a highly regarded attorney with extensive private sector experience. He served as federal prosecutor and attorney general for former President George H.W. Bush. Barr's reputation as a no-nonsense and highly talented attorney reportedly impressed the president. Barr also shares his philosophy on law enforcement and a strong executive branch. This is what Barr had to say just last year after the president fired then FBI Director James Comey.
The president certainly is entitled to his choice as FBI director. You can understand that the administration would want someone at the FBI who acknowledges, recognized limits on the power of the director.
And we take up the possible nomination with an all-star lineup here tonight. Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton, former U.S. Deputy Assistant Attorney General Tom Dupree, Russia hoax author and Fox legal analyst Greg Jarrett, all joining us tonight. And on Wall Street, a huge sell-off on fears that U.S.-China trade tensions were worsening with the arrest of Chinese telecom giant Huawei's CFO, but trade, it turns out, had nothing to do with the day. The market's explosive rebound proving it was all about rates. Reports that Fed officials would hold interest rates at current levels, postponing rate hikes indefinitely. President Trump has been right on all of the major issues facing this country. And on the economy, the president's newly appointed Fed chairman has been a frequent irritant and sometimes a disappointment. And Mr. Trump's concern that Jerome Powell was threatening to weaken economic growth with irresponsible rate hikes has been proven prescient. Here is the president 2 months ago warning the Fed to avoid raising interest rates.
My biggest threat is the Fed, because the Fed is raising rates too fast. Give me zero interest rates right now, and you take a look at our numbers. It'd be the greatest economy in the history of the world. Nobody would be able to compete with it.
Economic policy analyst Heather Zamaraga joins us here tonight on what was a dramatic 1,400-point trade in the Dow Jones Industrials today. And tonight, we'll have an update from Mexico, where the migrant caravan has frightened tourists and damaged businesses along the U.S.-Mexico border. And our top story, Fox News learning that President Trump wants William Barr to be his next attorney general. Barr served as attorney general for George H.W. Bush, a graduate of Columbia University and George Washington University Law School. Barr was just 42 when he became attorney general. President Trump does not know Barr personally, but Barr did step forward last year defending the president's decision to fire then FBI Director James Comey.
He crossed a basic line back in July, a fundamental line in the department, which is that investigations are supervised and directed by the lawyers, the prosecutors at the department, not the agents.
Barr, if nominated and confirmed by the Senate, would replace acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker, appointed by the president after Sessions' ouster and ultimate resignation on the 7th of November. Stocks rallying into the end of trading today, an extraordinary day on Wall Street, on news that the Federal Reserve could take a wait-and-see approach to future interest rate hikes. The Dow was down 780 points, and all of the talk was about trade tensions, before then rebounding to finish off at just a 79-point loss. The S&P down 4. The Nasdaq actually gained on the day, up 30 points. Many had blamed the early market plummet on the arrest of the CFO of Chinese telecom giant Huawei Technologies. Her arrest was reportedly part of a U.S. investigation of an alleged scheme to use the global banking system, helping Huawei evade U.S. sanctions against Iran. Joining us tonight, Tom Fitton, the president of Judicial Watch, one of the country's most effective government watchdog organizations. And Tom has also worked with the International Policy Forum, the Leadership Institute, Accuracy in Media as well. He's also the author of the book, Clean House, Exposing Our Government Secrets and Lies, which we recommend to you highly. Tom, good to see you. Let's start
good to be with you.
This is a, let's take up William Barr and what you think of him and his credentials.
Well, he certainly has the credentials for the typical Republican pick for Attorney General. He used to be Attorney General, and he has a long established record in the legal community. You know, the big question is he going to be willing to take on the Justice Department swamp that is really out of control through the Mueller investigation? And the challenge the president has is no matter who he picks as Attorney General, and I don't necessarily believe this is going to be the guy, it's not going to be about his pick. It's going to be about Robert Mueller when the Senate gets down to confirming and in the debate about the confirmation.
What do you mean by that? It's going to be Mueller.
The establishment in the Senate is going to force the Justice Department pick, the AG pick, to come out and say he's going to protect Mueller. And that can't be the case. We need an Attorney General who's actually going to assert control over Mr. Mueller, who, practically speaking, isn't being supervised in the way he needs to be.
Are you saying that the Senate is filled with such examples of moronic disadvantage that they would actually assert that Mueller has a privilege that would exceed that of the Attorney General and the President of the United States?
Well, I mean, we have one senator who upended every vote on every judicial nominee of the president, Jeff Flake, on his way out the door this year. Yeah. And I suspect some folks are going to do that in a more quiet way with the Attorney General pick. And, you know, Lou, are you aware of any sitting U.S. senator who has strongly criticized the Mueller investigation? I'm not. I've pressed this issue, and I've yet to hear one senator say Mueller needs to wrap it up. Mueller's out of control. Mueller's abusing the process here.
Tom, on this broadcast, I have said for a year and a half that the Mueller special counsel is a farce. It is completely out of control and has no accountability whatsoever to anyone than with Jeff Sessions as Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein. As you know, and as we've discussed on this broadcast over time, this is the most flawed, conflicted, fraudulent special counsel investigation or independent counsel investigation in earlier times that we've ever witnessed. And we've seen some doozies.
Well, that's right, and Mueller is the Justice Department, and the Justice Department is Mueller, and that's one of the dirty little secrets here is that they would have you believe that Mueller is operating independently. These are all, for the most part, Justice Department lawyers working for him. The compromised Andrew Weissman, who is an anti-Trumper, pro-Clinton activist, is his number two. He's out of the Justice Department. So this is about the Justice Department harassing the president, and is this new Attorney General going to bring back the Justice Department back into our constitutional system as opposed to allowing it to continue to act as if it's a fourth branch of government? I hope not. We had a federal court judge today, Lou, I don't know if you saw, Judge Royce Lamberth, excoriate this Justice Department for chicanery on protecting Hillary Clinton and excusing the misconduct that covered up her emails.
And while we're on the subject of the judge appointed by Ronald Reagan, we should point out is he excoriated what he calls chicanery. The beneficiary, it seems, without question, will be the American people, because your organization brought the action and are at least moving ahead with it as a result of the judge's ruling.
Over the objections of this Justice Department, we've been granted discovery into the Hillary Clinton email scandal. For instance, we get to ask whether or not she was using her email system to avoid FOIA. It's a Benghazi-related lawsuit, so that issue's coming up again. And again, it's why is Judicial Watch doing this, and why isn't the Justice Department on our side as opposed to opposing us? That's the real challenge for the Attorney General that much of the rest of the media won't want to talk about.
Well, this part of the media, I want to say congratulations and thank you for your great work, because without it, the American people, would just be, the obfuscation would go on relentlessly and without pause. Tom Fitton, thanks. Great to see you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Lou.
Up next, the left-wing national media taking aim at President Trump's America First trade agenda with China.
President Trump in the last few days has written 13 tweets about China. He's trying to reassure them. That's been the tone and tenor of the tweets. I don't know that it's been working.
You know, I think this is unprecedented and incredibly stupid. You know, I'm embarrassed about trade relations when we pull something like this.
This volatility right now is so much about what our brinksmanship is like with China.
There are burdens we put on the economy that are just foolish. And tariff fights with our allies, especially, and disrupting world trade for the sake of just foolish economic policies, that is just ridiculous.
But guess what? After all of the blather of the so-called self-anointed experts, who obviously know absolutely nothing about economics or markets, we watched this market lose as the business press decried trade disputes and trade tensions with China. But it was the Federal Reserve making it clear that they're prepared to pause and to hold interest rates where they are that led to a 700-point rebound on the day. We'll be taking up China and the real trade tensions and causes and likely consequences. Gordon Chang joins me here next. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Communist China demanding the release of Huawei Chief Financial Officer Ming Wanzhou after her arrest in Canada at the request of the United States. A spokesman for China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs says both the United States and Canada must, quote, effectively protect the legitimate rights and interest of the person concerned. Joining us tonight, Gordon Chang, author of the book, The Coming Collapse of China and The Nuclear Showdown. We recommend both to you highly, as always. Gordon, let's start with the arrest of the chief financial officer of Huawei because of violations of our Iranian sanctions. This is a big step, isn't it?
It's a very important step for a number of reasons. First of all, we've had a number of administrations that have allowed the violation of Iran and North Korea sanctions. This administration, however, is saying, look, no more. And the other thing, of course, Huawei is critically important to China's efforts to dominate 5G. Right. You know, China has this Made in China 2025 initiative, gotten a lot of play. It started out with 10 sectors in 2015 when it was announced. They increased the sectors to 11 in the beginning of this year to include 5G, which means that Huawei is at the core of China's efforts to dominate the world.
Yeah, dominate the world, certainly, and as a condition preceding to that, to dominate in technology in 5G and its advances. Huawei, however, is now at a interesting juncture because the United States is basically saying to China, this stops here. And do you see that as the correct interpretation?
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, this is also ZTE, which is the second largest Chinese telecom equipment manufacturer, just behind Huawei.
Which the president rescued because of his concerns about its effect on trade relations and the relationship overall with Xi. He rescued because the president of China asked him to do so. And now, where do we stand with ZTE?
Well, we have two senators, Marco Rubio and Chris Van Hollen, who have asked the president to look at this. And the reason is that ZTE apparently busted that second settlement agreement that we had. Two violations of two settlement agreements. And this is essentially for selling Dell equipment to Venezuela in violation of American export controls. ZTE promised not to do this in July. That was the second settlement agreement that they violated.
And there was supposed to be a range of management changes and governorship, i.e. changes to the board of directors, none of which apparently had much effect.
Certainly didn't.
Let's turn to now the relationship on trade. The president has worked hard. He has made it clear two things are going to happen. One is that trade will be balanced with China or nothing will happen. He has made it clear that $600 billion of Chinese theft of U.S. Intellectual property and technology will happen no longer. Those are the two metrics by which any deal will be judged. Your thoughts about where we're headed?
That's absolutely critical on the IP. You know, this is the innovation. This is the technology of the future. This is the economy of the future. And, you know, talk about Huawei. That company was built on the theft of IP from Cisco and others. And so essentially China built its telecom equipment manufacturing sector, Huawei and ZTE, on the backs of stolen U.S. technology.
And you can't say it too strongly. Huawei and other Chinese enterprises, highly successful and large, concentrated government-owned assets, in point of fact, are built on U.S. technology, commercial technology, as well as scientific technology and intellectual property. And that, just think about this, without President Trump focusing on this issue, this relationship, we would be run over.
You know, there were two
without
presidents,
any question.
Clinton and George W. Bush, who just sort of couldn't be bothered by this. We had another president, Obama, who actually confronted the Chinese but decided to do nothing effective. Now we got a president who's confronting the Chinese and doing something effective. People may not like it, but clearly we've got to deal with these critical issues of trade and IP theft.
Those people have to understand something about themselves. If you don't like what the president is doing vis-a-vis China and the relationship, the trade relationship, the geopolitical relationship between the United States and China, you just don't understand what is happening. It's horrible. And the establishment forces in this country are railing against the president's insistence on the national interest of being recognized and pursued, period. Gordon, great to have you here.
Thanks, Lou.
We have so much we could talk about. Come back as soon as you can, and we'll continue the conversation because it is about the country's future, as Gordon Chang says. Gordon, thank you.
Thanks, Lou.
Be sure to vote in tonight's poll. Do you believe more executives of communist Chinese firms should be arrested for their wanton violation of U.S. sanctions against Iran? We'd like to hear from you on the issue. Cast your vote on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Follow me on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Like me on Facebook. Follow me on Instagram at Lou Dobbs Tonight. Up next, French President Macron's approval rating tumbling as he predicts more violence. That's right, the leader of France is predicting more violence on the streets of France, and in particular Paris. We take that up, much more, right after the break. Ed Rollins joins us. Stay with us. We'll be right back. French President Emmanuel Macron, the socialist, well, his approval rating has hit another new low. Violent protests raging through the streets of Paris. Still, just 23% of French citizens approving of the president, down 6 points over the past month. And businesses in Mexico, in Tijuana, catering to American tourists, have seen a drop in business as a result of the migrant caravans' presence in their fair city. With the migrant unrest south of the border, a growing number of Americans are worried they run the risk of being stuck south of the border if the authorities shut down the border, as the president has threatened. Joining me now, top strategist for Great America PAC, former Reagan White House political director and Fox Business political analyst, Ed Rollins.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Let's start with first Barr. Worked for H.W. Bush in his administration.
I actually started in the Reagan administration. He worked with Ed Meese, and then he became, at a very young age, 42 years old, the Attorney General. He's a very competent person. He knows that agency well. I think the president needs someone who can go in there and clean house, doesn't have to have a learning curve, can walk in on day one, and basically is the right premise that everybody in there reports to him, and he reports to the president.
Big issue. He's establishment. This president is anti-establishment. This president is his own man. What do you think?
Well, it could be a fit. I mean, I think that's a conversation the president has to have with him, and he has to give him very clear direction. This is what I want to do. I think the president has not had good lawyers since the start, and my sense is the next 2 years he's going to be in a lot of legal issues because of all the outside entities that are going to go after him. And the key thing here is to have that department running smoothly and not interfering with the things that the president needs to have.
Well, Giuliani has straightened everything out, right?
Not quite. He's distracted by his own divorce, I think. But and I think there's too much popping off. I think the bottom line here is you need someone in there who basically shuts it down, make sure it functions well, and the line of authority is very clear.
I don't know Barr either, but from the positions he's taken. His straightforward style I really like. If the president's impressed by him, that should be it.
The other thing is he made a lot of money. He doesn't need to be the attorney general. He's been the attorney general. And so, he's at an age where he knows the task ahead of him. And I think to a certain extent, there's no learning curve. You can walk in on day one and make things happen.
Are we now, the vote is in, the records are available. The Judiciary Committee has done everything that it possibly could to slow roll the President of the United States, delay his agenda, delay everything that they could in the investigations. They have acted as an adjunct of the Justice Department and the FBI, some of the most rancid political traitors that we've ever seen, and that we've seen a few.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. I think the bottom line here is that they have, on a daily basis, done everything we need to clean the Mueller thing up. We need to get this thing moving forward. We've got a 2-year agenda that has to move very quickly. We have Democrats to fight in the House now, and I think the reality is that the president needs his own team, his own agenda.
The reality is, if I can put it that way, that this president is facing existential threats.
By far.
Whether they be Russia, whether they be the People's Republic of China, whether it be a body politic in this country, part of which is committed to the destruction of Donald Trump and his agenda.
Well, even more so with the new Democrat leadership in the House. I think the key thing here is the agenda has to be, as the world is changing rapidly around this president, he has to be out there being able to deal with that and not being distracted by the petty stuff back at home.
Okay, so on the December 21st, we just got the spending bill that funds the government through till the 21st of December. The issue really is there. Does the president get, the paltry sum that he's asked for from the time he came in? Right. $5 billion is the first installment on a $25 billion wall. Signature, basic, fundamental promise that he made.
He has to get it. And Speaker-elect Pelosi has already said today he won't get it, won't get anything. And I think he's got to basically prove that he's willing to go all to wall with her or toe and toe to. And he has to win this one. If he doesn't win this one, there'll be an erosion of some of his support.
In order to do that, he has to be willing to shut down the government.
And as I said, the bottom line is you're not shutting the whole government down. You're only shutting a part of it down. And you need to show that you mean serious business. Otherwise, Democrats are going to see you as weak and try and do everything they can to run over you.
You and I know that the national left-wing media will...
Who cares?
Well, the reason you care is because in many cases they're going to lie through their teeth till the cows come home.
Well, I promise you the American public can still have Christmas and still move forward. But I think the president needs this to hold his base.
I couldn't agree more.
Right.
Good to see you, partner.
Thank you.
Thanks. Ed Rollins. Up next, President Trump's mayor presence at George H.W. Bush's funeral, inspiring an outbreak of, well, we thought it would be something of a truce by the left-wing national media. Instead, more hate.
All he could do was sort of sit there, and the rest of the program went on. And I thought he was irrelevant.
You don't hear much humility. You don't hear much humor from the White House, certainly these days.
To see President Trump sitting with the former presidents, paying tribute to a leader whose humility and decency is so different from today's politics.
I don't think you want to give out too many medals for not screwing up a presidential funeral. The president was on best behavior this week, but that's a fairly low bar.
Arrogance is one thing, but that kind of arrogance is quite another. And if all of that wasn't enough, the president being attacked for something he didn't do. Pastor Robert Jeffress will join me right after this break. We'll take up the latest media nonsense as they foment hate. It's extraordinary. And former corrupt FBI Director James Comey, former FBI Director, heading to Capitol Hill tomorrow. That ought to be exciting. We take it up next with Fox legal analyst Greg Jarrett, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General Tom Dupree. What will we learn in these waning hours of the Republican-controlled House? Stay with us. We'll be right back. President Trump taking aim at Robert Mueller. The president blaming the special counsel for dragging his approval ratings down. The president tweeted this saying, quote, "Without the phony Russia witch hunt and with all that we've accomplished in the last almost 2 years, tax and regulation cuts, judges, military, vets, etc., my approval rating would be at 75% rather than the 50% just reported by Rasmussen. It's called presidential harassment." You got to love that. Presidential harassment. It is all of that and much more. Joining me now, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General Tom Dupree, a partner now in the Washington, D.C. office of Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher, one of the leading appellate attorneys in this country. Good to see you, Tom.
Good evening, Lou.
Fox legal analyst, author of the New York Times bestseller, The Russia Hoax. And he always makes me go to the subtitle, The Illicit Scheme to Clear Hillary Clinton and Frame Donald Trump.
I should have made it shorter.
You should have. But I said one who's put out a few books with tireless subtitles, I understand. Great to have you with us, gentlemen. Let's start, Tom, with you. William Barr, is he the right man for this president in this time?
I think it was a good choice, Lou, or at least a potentially good choice. The fact is Barr is someone who obviously has had the job before. I think he's widely regarded as a serious guy, a credible guy, a guy who knows how the Justice Department operates on a daily basis. I will say this, though, Lou. I was a bit surprised in that Trump obviously holds himself out as someone who's a disruptor, who makes the unconventional, non-establishment choice, and Barr isn't quite that. Don't get me wrong. I think it's a good choice, but it isn't quite the direction that I thought President Trump would be going in.
What direction do you think he'd go?
I thought that he might go for someone with whom he had a longer personal history. Yeah. Frankly, I think it's good. I think it is good to get someone who is independent, precisely because they will have the courage to stand up to you and wave you off terrible ideas.
When you prosecutors use that word independent, because that, to me, is just pure nonsense.
Well, it's
the Attorney General works for the president. The president is the boss for that department, just like any other. And an independent should not be synonymous with the word rogue, because that's what we witnessed with this round.
I agree that independent should not be synonymous with rogue. I think that the Attorney General's job is to implement the president's law enforcement agenda. But at the same time, you want someone who's an honest broker, who is not afraid to call it as he sees it and tells the president in some cases the law doesn't allow you to do this.
Yeah. Well, he's got a phalanx of lawyers around him. He shouldn't have
no shortage there. No shortage.
What do you think, Greg?
Well, I slightly respectfully disagree with Tom. The president has a duty to direct the attorney general what to do, what not to do. This whole notion of independence is a canard that's been peddled for 40 years. Now, as for William Barr, I'm sort of two minds. Yes, unquestionable integrity, a fine reputation, great experience. He brings gravitas to the job, but he is an establishment figure at a time when I think we need a disruptor as Attorney General, somebody who would vigorously go after corrupt officials at the FBI and Department of Justice who were abusing their positions of power and attempting to undermine democracy. I'm afraid Barr is not that guy.
Well, let's talk about that. There are a lot of issues we could discuss, but I think it's helpful tonight if we spend some time on this issue with both of you. Tom, this is an establishment figure, but at the same time, he has been very supportive of the president's right to have fired Robert Mueller, volubly so, in point of fact. The establishment thing really does, worry everybody. But I don't know if, and I'd like to ask both of you the same question. Can this president get a non-establishment figure through the Senate?
Well, I think that is a great question because, as we know, although the Republicans do have the majority and can push it through, they can't tolerate many defections. And I don't know if in this political climate, all the Republicans would adhere to support whomever the president nominates for Attorney General. As far as Barr's history goes, I think you are absolutely right. And I think Barr recognizes the fact that the president has the power to fire Bob Mueller. I think kind of where the rubber hits the road is what advice would he give him? Even if the president has the power constitutionally to do it, is it a smart thing to do? Is it justified? Does it make sense? And I think that's where Barr will be able to provide the president with sound advice.
Dianne Feinstein said today, I don't know anything about him. I don't have an opinion on him. I guarantee you within a couple of days of his being nominated, if he is nominated, she'll have a firm opinion against him. So it doesn't matter. I mean, Democrats are going to vote against whomever the president nominates. Frankly,
than I was about the
well, Jeff Flake's gone.
Well, unfortunately,
thankfully,
he left a
perfect name for the guy, huh?
Well, all of that. But as we look at what the president faces here, and it really gets to this issue, he is going to. I think you have to presume, at least assume, without being presumptuous, that he will seek a second term. To do so, he is going to have to bring into line the special counsel, in my opinion, and this entire charade, this fraud that's been perpetrated on him. He's exactly right. It is harassment of it by any other, and that's the lightest, word we could apply. Tom, what does he have to do to get this under control?
Well, look, Lou, my hope has always been that Bob Mueller is going to be winding up this investigation in the not-too-distant future.
How long?
Well, I have always said from day one that this investigation is going to go one heck of a lot longer than anyone anticipates. But the fact that Mueller now has gotten the responses from the president, the fact that he has apparently struck deals with Cohen, apparently struck deals with Flynn and other people, it signals to me that this thing is closer to the end than the beginning. And I would be absolutely astounded if this thing is still going as Donald Trump approaches a second term. I don't think it will.
Mueller will issue a report that is one-sided, biased, full of supposition and conjecture about this narrative collusion with not a whiff of real evidence. But Mueller will try to portray it as such for Democrats in Congress to take political action in a thing they call impeachment.
I think at some point, this president is going to have to take very strong action to bring the Justice Department and the FBI to justice, because right now all of the people have been named and as perpetrators in one of the greatest series of acts of political corruption in our history are going scot-free.
Right.
Tom Dupree, Greg Jarrett, thank you both. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Liv.
Thanks. The national left-wing media will find anything to criticize this president, as you've noticed. Their latest case of fake outrage stemming from President Trump and the First Lady respectfully honoring the life of George H.W. Bush, while others around them read the Apostles' Creed. Nothing in the scripture says you must state the creed, but several reporters took to Twitter calling it curious, interesting, as the little snarks said, even striking, that the president and his wife chose not to recite the creed. Here to take this up with us, Robert Jeffress, pastor of the First Baptist Church of Dallas, Fox Business contributor, author of the book Choosing the Extraordinary Life, and another book that we recommend to you highly. And Pastor, great to see you. I had never heard of the Apostles' Creed, frankly. What is the big deal?
Look, this is a nothing burger that has been cooked up by Trump haters who are trying to separate the president from his evangelical base. And, Lou, it isn't going to work. Look, I have stood next to President Trump at a White House dinner, heard him recite the Lord's Prayer with the group. I sat behind him and Mrs. Trump at the Billy Graham funeral, watched them sing the hymns. People say, well, why didn't he do that here? Look, I'm the pastor of a church, and there are times I don't recite the scriptures and I don't sing the hymns because I'm thinking about something else. I would just imagine the leader of the free world probably has a few other things on his mind, too, even at a funeral service. This whole thing is ridiculous.
Yeah, and is it a popular convention to recite that? I don't understand.
Yeah, well, it is in some churches. Hillary Clinton, a lifelong Methodist, recites it every Sunday at her church. But look, we know that it is not the words we mouth with our lips that makes us a Christian.
If you don't mind. Pastor Robert Jeffress,
you bet.
Thanks for being with us. We appreciate it. Up next, the left-wing national business media ignoring President Trump's long list of economic achievements, the extraordinary success of his administration, and what a set-to over this week's market sell-off. We'll tell you about the boom, the boomerangs, and the rebounds. Heather Zamaraga joins us here next to take all of that up. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Than I was about the
well, Jeff Flake's gone.
Well, unfortunately,
thankfully,
he left a
perfect name for the guy, huh?
Well, all of that. But as we look at what the president faces here, and it really gets to this issue, he is going to, I think you have to presume, at least assume, without being presumptuous, that he will seek a second term. To do so, he is going to have to bring into line the special counsel, in my opinion, and this entire charade, this fraud that's been perpetrated on him. He's exactly right. It is harassment of it by any other, and that's the lightest, word we could apply. Tom, what does he have to do to get this under control?
Well, look, Lou, my hope has always been that Bob Mueller is going to be winding up this investigation in the not
We've heard
too
that
distant
for
future.
how long?
Well, I have always said from day one that this investigation is going to go one heck of a lot longer than anyone anticipates. But the fact that Mueller now has gotten the responses from the president, the fact that he has apparently struck deals with Cohen, apparently struck deals with Flynn and other people, it signals to me that this thing is closer to the end than the beginning. And I would be absolutely astounded if this thing is still going as Donald Trump approaches a second term. I don't think it will.
Mueller will issue a report that is one-sided, biased, full of supposition and conjecture about this narrative collusion with not a whiff of real evidence. But Mueller will try to portray it as such for Democrats in Congress to take political action in a thing they call impeachment.
I think at some point, this president is going to have to take very strong action to bring the Justice Department and the FBI to justice, because right now all of the people have been named and as perpetrators in one of the greatest series of acts of political corruption in our history are going scot-free.
Right.
Tom Dupree, Greg Jarrett, thank you both. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Liv.
Thanks. The national left-wing media will find anything to criticize this president, as you've noticed. Their latest case of fake outrage stemming from President Trump and the First Lady respectfully honoring the life of George H.W. Bush, while others around them read the Apostles' Creed. Nothing in the scripture says you must state the creed, but several reporters took to Twitter calling it curious, interesting, as the little snarks said, even striking, that the president and his wife chose not to recite the creed. Here to take this up with us, Robert Jeffress, pastor of the First Baptist Church of Dallas, Fox Business contributor, author of the book Choosing the Extraordinary Life, and another book that we recommend to you highly. And Pastor, great to see you. I had never heard of the Apostles' Creed, frankly. What is the big deal?
Look, this is a nothing burger that has been cooked up by Trump haters who are trying to separate the president from his evangelical base. And, Lou, it isn't going to work. Look, I have stood next to President Trump at a White House dinner, heard him recite the Lord's Prayer with the group. I sat behind him and Mrs. Trump at the Billy Graham funeral, watched them sing the hymns. People say, well, why didn't he do that here? Look, I'm the pastor of a church, and there are times I don't recite the scriptures and I don't sing the hymns because I'm thinking about something else. I would just imagine the leader of the free world probably has a few other things on his mind, too, even at a funeral service. This whole thing is ridiculous.
Yeah, and is it a popular convention to recite that? I don't understand.
Yeah, well, it is in some churches. Hillary Clinton, a lifelong Methodist, recites it every Sunday at her church. But look, we know that it is not the words we mouth with our lips that makes us a Christian.
If you don't mind. Pastor Robert Jeffress,
well, you bet.
Thanks for being with us. We appreciate it. Up next, the left-wing national business media ignoring President Trump's long list of economic achievements, the extraordinary success of his administration, and what a set-to over this week's market sell-off. We'll tell you about the boom, the boomerangs, and the rebounds. Heather Zamaraga joins us here next to take all of that up. Stay with us. We'll be right back.